The Meanest Doll in the World by Anne Martin and Laura Goodwin. Chapter 16. Former Best Friends. Alarmed, Annabelle turned to look at the spot where the camper had stood. What she saw now was a dusty rectangle of bare floor amid stuffed animals, a clothes rack, and an easy-bake oven. In front of a large lion stood Mom Funcraft, her mouth in a perfect O of surprise, one hand still clutching the string, the other clutching the tiara. "I cut the string like I was supposed to," Mom Funcraft managed to say. "I don't know how." "Captain!" the dolls heard Grandma Catherine exclaim from downstairs. "Hide! Everybody hide!" squeaked Uncle Doll. The Funcrafts, carrying the string and the tiara, fled from Kate's room faster than Annabelle had ever seen them run, and the dolls scrambled up the stool to their house in less than 2 minutes. By the time Grandma Catherine entered Kate's room, Annabelle and her family were in their positions in the dollhouse. Grandma Catherine set the camper down back in its spot, and Annabelle was surprised to see that she looked annoyed rather than startled or puzzled. But when Grandma Catherine turned and saw the captain pad wearily into the room behind her, Annabelle understood why. "There you are, Captain, you naughty thing," said Grandma Catherine. She scooped the captain into her arms. "I told Annie you couldn't be trusted upstairs, but she wanted to give you another chance. And look what happened. You could have gotten yourself hurt, Captain. How on earth do you get yourself into these situations?" Grandma Catherine carried the captain down the hall, talking all the way. Annabelle knew that the captain would once again be banished to the first floor, but she barely felt relieved. Compared to Mean Mimi, the captain was nothing more than an annoyance, like a flea or a hiccup. Mean Mimi was another story. Annabelle glanced at the Barbie camper. The shoelace was gone, but attached to the door handle was a tiny piece of string. It was the only sign in the doll's plan to capture Mimi. Annabelle told herself to be sure to remove the string that night before Kate noticed it. The dolls knew they had been taking too many risks since Mean Mimi had arrived. For the next 3 days, they stayed put in their houses, except when Annabelle ventured out to remove the string. They saw no sign of either Mean Mimi or the captain. Annabelle hadn't expected to see the captain again, but Mimi's disappearance made her feel nervous. On the third evening, she was desperate to talk to Tiffany. "Can I please visit Tiffany tonight?" she begged her parents. "Please? We can't hide in our houses forever. We'll go crazy. Plus, we don't want Mimi to think that she has some sort of control over us, do we? She can't make us prisoners in our own homes." The dolls relented more quickly than Annabelle had expected, partly because Auntie Sarah announced that she thought it was high time she began planning another exploration. "Annabelle's right," she said. "We can't hole up endlessly." "I can," muttered Uncle Doll, but Mama and Papa ignored him. And at last they gave Annabelle permission to visit Tiffany. "Go straight to Nora's room, though," they admonished her. "No dilly-dallying." 5 minutes later, Annabelle was hurrying through the Palmers' hallway, then picking her way through the toys on Nora's floor. "Yoo-hoo," she called softly when she reached Tiffany's house. Tiffany was overjoyed to see her friend. "It's been like 3 years instead of 3 days," she said. "Want to go to the attic? I bet Mimi hasn't found the attic yet." Annabelle wasn't so sure, and the thought of creeping around with Mimi on the loose terrified her, until she remembered her own words. She did not, in fact, want Mimi to think that she had any power over the dolls. And so she agreed to go to the attic with Tiffany. Do you think it'll be okay with your parents? Tiffany wanted to know. I think so, replied Annabelle. They didn't say not to go to the attic. And so Annabelle and Tiffany made their way up to the Palmer's attic, where they sat in a dusty corner behind a discarded hat box. Usually they tried to find a spot of moonlight, but not on this evening. They wanted darkness. Isn't it creepy? Said Tiffany, when they had settled onto the floor. You mean that we haven't seen Mimi? Yes. Where do you think she is? Annabelle wrinkled her nose. I don't know. The scary thing is that she could be anywhere. Maybe Kate or Nora found her, said Tiffany. Maybe she's been closed in a drawer or shut in a closet and she can't get out. Maybe she left the Palmer's house, suggested Annabelle. On her own? Exclaimed Tiffany. Why not? Annabelle tried to sound casual, but the thought of a doll walking along the street made Annabelle shiver. You're afraid, aren't you? Asked Tiffany. Yes, Annabelle admitted. I'm trying so hard to think about positive things and to do my breathing exercises, but sometimes I just can't help thinking about what trouble me and Mimi might cause and about what could happen if too many humans become suspicious about dolls, rumors, and all that. They really are very dangerous. I know, said Tiffany in a small voice. And then I feel vulnerable, Annabelle continued. Auntie Sarah explained that the word vulnerable means that when you don't feel good and you feel exposed, but that's understandable. That's what Auntie Sarah said. It isn't helpful to me, so I mostly concentrate on feeling smart and strong and positive. A rustle nearby made Annabelle and Tiffany jump. What was that? Tiffany whispered. When they heard nothing more, Annabelle said, probably just a mouse. And Tiffany agreed. Probably, she said in a small voice. You know what else? Annabelle said after a moment. This is a negative thought, and I have to tell myself to stop thinking it. But sometimes it creeps back in anyway. What is it? Asked Tiffany. Well, said Annabelle, I'm afraid that all this trouble is my fault. Your fault? How is it your fault? Because if I hadn't fallen in the spider's web during our exploration with Auntie Sarah, then we would have come downstairs just a few minutes earlier, and we wouldn't have had to hide in Kate's backpack, and we wouldn't have gone off to school with her, and we wouldn't have gone to see BJ's house, and me and Mimi wouldn't have come home with us. Oh, Annabelle, said Tiffany, you couldn't help tripping. Besides, Auntie Sarah had already let us stay in the attic too long. I know, but I did trip, and it made us even later. I'm not like you, Tiffany. You do everything right. You're bold and strong and adventurous, just like Auntie Sarah. And I'm afraid of falling and climbing. I'm even afraid of getting wet. You're you, Annabelle, said Tiffany. Annabelle managed a small smile. 2 nights later, long after the Palmers had gone to bed, Annabelle Doll sat inside the Barbie camper, practicing her breathing and enjoying having a few moments all to herself. Breathe in, breathe out. Calm, calm, calm. She leaned back in the plastic chair and gazed out the window of the camper. Kate's room, bathed in moonlight, was still. She heard nothing from the dollhouse, nothing from the direction of Kate's bed. Breathe in, breathe out. Calm, calm, calm. Slam! The door of the camper banged open so fast and with such force that Annabelle, startled, slid sideways off the chair and tumbled onto the floor with a gasp. Mean Mimi stood in the doorway, her glittery princess clothing sparkling in the moonlight. Bonjour, crybaby, she greeted Annabelle. Annabelle climbed back into the chair and sat up straight, pushing the chair as far from the door as possible. Mimi! She cried. She glanced out the window of the camper, but she could only see a corner of the dollhouse. What are you doing here? Well, Mimi began, idly twirling a lock of her hair. I just thought you'd be interested to know that I heard Tiffany and your aunt talking about you last night. What? Annabelle tried to back away, but could move no further. Yep, I heard them talking about you. And do you know what? They're planning a big exploration, and they're not going to invite you along. They aren't? Annabelle was surprised and confused. No, because you always ruin things, like when you fell into the spider's web. How did you know I fell into a spider's web? I just told you. I heard Tiffany and your aunt talking. Tiffany said she's tired hanging around with a fraidy cat. You're no fun to be with. You're afraid of everything. What a bore. Plus, Mimi continued with a sweet smile, you're the cause of everyone's problems. Because if it weren't for you, I wouldn't be here. Annabelle tried to speak, but could think of nothing to say. She had confided these fears in only one person, Tiffany, and Tiffany had betrayed her. Well, said Mimi, just thought I'd drop by for a chat. See you later. Annabelle watched Mimi run through Kate's room and disappear into the hallway. She sat still for a moment. She wanted to talk to someone, but the two people with whom she ordinarily shared her problems were Tiffany and Auntie Sarah, and she was never, ever going to talk to either one of them again. Ever. Annabelle stood up and looked out the camper door. Where were Tiffany and Auntie Sarah anyway? She hadn't seen them in several hours. Were they already on the exploration without her? Annabelle decided she was going to sit in the doorway of the camper until she saw Tiffany, and then she was going to ask her a few questions. So Annabelle sat and sat and sat, and the longer she sat, the more cross she felt. It was just before dawn when Annabelle saw Tiffany peek into Kate's room. Tiffany was alone. No Auntie Sarah, and Annabelle was glad. Tiffany, she called softly. Oh, hi, there you are, Tiffany replied, and she hurried across the room and stood outside the camper. So, what have you been up to tonight? Do you care? Replied Annabelle. What? I said, Do you care? I know that's what you said, but what's it supposed to mean? It means when I tell you secrets, I don't expect you to tell them to anyone else. Annabelle, I don't know what you're talking about. Oh no. Annabelle, one hand on her hip, told Tiffany about me and Mimi's visit. But I didn't say anything to anyone, cried Tiffany. I swear, I didn't say a word. Then how come Mimi knows about the spider web and everything? You're the only one I said those things to. Well, that's not my problem, replied Tiffany. You sound awfully defensive, said Annabelle. I sound defensive because my best friend is accusing me of talking behind her back. Tiffany paused. Excuse me, my former best friend. Well, excuse me, I don't have a best friend, former or otherwise, so don't worry about it. Fine, I won't worry about it. And anyway, I'm not speaking to you. Well, I'm not speaking to you, cried Annabelle. Fine, fine. Tiffany marched back across Kate's room and into the night. And Annabelle, feeling more miserable than she had ever felt in her whole long life, marched into the dollhouse and got into bed. She pulled the covers over her head and then called, "And don't anybody try to talk to me.